Hi everyone, this is truly so exciting. I'm gonna be so honest, when I started this YouTube channel, I thought I would literally be talking to maybe 50 people tops, and I was okay with that. I was like, Queen, we are gonna be in for a ride, slow and steady wins the race. But here I am, 3 months into this channel existing, and we're at over 1,000 of you baddies. I am so grateful, and I've seen every single comment that's been left on the March astrology video that I did, and guys, thank you so much for the love. Seriously, it means so much. And I'm so glad that a bad bee like me has caught your attention because I am working on some new things, and best believe you're going to be getting some great content from me in the next coming months. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Also, like now that I've opened up the gates to YouTube, it really is a different vibe from TikTok and Instagram. Like I feel safe here, and I'm working on a system of when I can put content out to you guys, like a specific day or something, so that we can all be consistent. But I don't know yet. I'm not quite there. This is just the beginning, and I know everyone says that, but like, seriously, you guys are just seeing a nano piece of what I'm capable of and of what's to come from me. So thanks for being here, and I hope you guys enjoy the ride. Before I get into the video, if you're new here, welcome, and make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you're not new, thanks for coming back. Make sure that you guys hit that like button, drop a comment, and turn on your notifications to make sure that you never missed a video from me. So as you can see in the title, today I'm talking about Neptune entering Aries. Neptune will be in Aries from March 30th, 2025 to October 22nd, 2025. It will retrograde into Pisces, and then we'll go back in Aries to stay until May 22nd, 2038, and then it enters Taurus. Of course, after it enters Taurus, it'll do one little dancey dance back into Aries. So the official cutoff for Neptune and Aries will be March 23rd, 2039. And believe it or not, there's a lot that I have to say about this because Neptune is an outer planet, a generational planet, which means that history and cycles are extremely important. And let me explain because I love to give some context. The outer planets in astrology are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. If you remember learning about the solar system in school, which for me was like 3 years ago because I'm a young queen, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were at the end of the little song that we sang because they are the furthest away from the sun. Uranus takes about 84 to 85 years to orbit the sun and then moves through the zodiac signs every 7 years. Neptune takes about 165 years to orbit the sun and moves through a zodiac sign about every 14 to 15 years. And then Pluto takes about 240 to 50 years to orbit the sun and moves through a zodiac sign anywhere from 12 years to 31 years because of its elliptical orbit. Essentially, what that all means is that these are slow moving planets as f. And the slow movement of outer planets makes them really good at shaping generational trends and long-term societal changes because they stay in that same place for such a long time. Whereas the inner planets like Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, right, influence daily life and personal experiences because they change signs very often. The sun changes signs every single month. The moon changes signs every 2 to 3 days. Mercury changes signs every 2 to 3 weeks. Those planets are fast moving, but the outer planets are believed to shape collective evolution and generational shifts. Example, boomers. I love talking about this. Boomers were born when Pluto was in Leo, okay? Leo is influenced by the heliocentric energy of the sun, which relates to personal identity and ego and authority, wanting to be seen and be in the spotlight. It's the sun. Leo has these qualities of being idealistic, individualistic, materialistic, and focused on personal freedom. And boomers are usually associated with a me first mentality. They have this weird desire for personal recognition all the time. A boomer can go into a busy restaurant. The server is swamped, focusing on 1,000 different things at once at 1,000 different tables. And the only thing the boomer is thinking about is themselves and why their steak is taking so long. Mind you, they ordered a well-done steak, which takes like 25 to 30 minutes. Anyway, also because of that Leo influence, they were seen as the first generation to truly experience affluence and consumerism on a big scale. That's very Leo. Leo is big on grand spending and luxury, and they were born during like old Hollywood and during a time when reshaping the American dream into one where self-actualization and material gain became really core values. All very Pluto and Leo, all very boomer. So that's one of the many examples I could give you guys on how an outer planet being in a certain sign really just makes this generational impact. But also, side note, that's why the astrology of 2025 is so important and chaotic, and really just the events that happen this year are going to be important because Neptune is changing signs. Uranus is changing signs this year. And Pluto, this outer planet and dwarf planet, changed signs technically last year, but it went back into Capricorn and did a little retrograde. So this year is the first year it's fully in its new sign of Aquarius. Like, this is all of the outer planets really changing energies entirely. And so collectively, as generations, not just personally, we're going to feel it. And these shifts are going to impact us a lot more globally and politically than it will personally. I'm using my hands a lot, aren't I? You would think I'm a Gemini rising or something. Anyway, so to understand where we might be going with Neptune and Aries, we have to look back first, right? And you probably have heard me say, and I will continue to say, that astrology is all about cycles, the cycle of life, right? So whatever was happening when Neptune was last in Aries is going to resurface in some way or some shape or some form. The last time that Neptune entered Aries was April 1861, a moment that would come to really define a seismic shift in global consciousness. And to put this in perspective, just one day before Neptune entered Aries in 1861, the American Civil War officially began with the bombardment of Fort Sumter. And this was, is it Fort Sumner? What is it called? Fort Summer? Wait, let me figure this out. It's Fort Sumter, period. I was right. Anyway, that's not a coincidence, right? Neptune, this planet of ideals, of illusions, of mass movements, stepping into Aries, the sign of war and fire and the assertion of will, really initiated one of the bloodiest conflicts in American history. But the Civil War was only one manifestation of Neptune in Aries, because globally, that entire 1861 to 1875 period saw so many revolutions, so many wars of independence, the rise of nationalist movements, and overall just this redefining of identity, both personal and collective. This was a time when ideological battles were no longer contained within philosophy or rhetoric. They erupted into physical war and insurrection and radical action. And now, as Neptune returns to Aries, I think we have to ask, like, what unfinished lessons are coming back for us? It's truly something I can't beat around the bush as an astrologer, because I see the cycles, I see the patterns, and I'm not even factoring in the real mess, which is Uranus entering Gemini this year. So look out for that video. So to understand Neptune and Aries more deeply, I also have to mention Neptune in Pisces, because cycles, transitions, very important. Neptune in Pisces prior to 1861 had created this illusion of unity in the United States, an illusion that the growing ideological rift over slavery and economic power and national identity could somehow be ignored or patched over with compromise. But as Neptune entered Aries, that illusion practically shattered. Action became inevitable. The war was not just a battle over land or governance, it was a war over ideals, over versions of the future, because Neptune in Aries has this pattern of making belief systems so strong, so all-encompassing, that they no longer are theoretical. They need to get dealt with physically, right? We're talking about Aries, right? So in 1861, abolitionists and secessionists alike were no longer satisfied with just debating, right? They were ready to fight for their visions. And I think this is such an important lesson for our upcoming Neptune and Aries era. You know, when ideological divides become too deep, confrontation becomes inevitable. I've seen recently so many people telling the Democrats to stand up, and like holding those signs and protesting peacefully is no longer working. People are saying that the Democrats have to start playing on the same level as these MAGA Republicans and whatnot, and starting to be like, fight fire with fire, right? Kind of energy. And unfortunately, it's just going to get deeper and deeper. Neptune rules deception and confusion and propaganda. And in Aries, that deception takes an extremely militant form. In the American Civil War, both the North and the South believed that they were fighting a noble, righteous cause. Both sides were fueled by this hero complex, which is a very Neptune theme. Soldiers went to war believing that they were fulfilling divine destiny. Political leaders framed the war as a sacred duty. And this is what makes Neptune and Aries both very powerful and very dangerous. It's dangerous because it creates this spiritualized warfare. It's ideological battles fought as if they are holy missions. Are you guys with me? Because this is some scary because I promise you, we think it's bad now, but we have not seen anything of what's to come. Neptune has not even entered Aries yet as I'm recording this. Uranus has not entered Gemini yet. It does so in July. And in 2025, we're just getting breadcrumbs of these two transits because they both do a retrograde later on in the year. And how does this relate to today? Some of you may be thinking. The world is already divided along ideological lines, politically, socially, economically. And when Neptune enters Aries, we will see the culmination of tensions that have been simmering beneath the surface for years. What has been debated for years, philosophized for years, or ignored for years will demand action. Social movements will radicalize. Governments will take more extreme stances. People will feel an overwhelming call to act on their beliefs, for better or for worse. The Civil War was just one expression of this transit. And as an American, that's why I'm talking about it as an example. But across the world, Neptune and Aries coincided with revolutions, wars of unification, and the rise of very powerful nationalist movements. And this is crucial because it means that Neptune and Aries doesn't just create war, right? It creates a deep restructuring of identity. One of the biggest historical events during this transit was the unification of Italy. Before Neptune entered Aries in 1861, Italy was a fragmented collection of states, many under foreign control. But under Neptune and Aries, the country unified for the first time in centuries, and the Kingdom of Italy was officially established in 1861. And by 1871, Rome had been declared the capital. And that tells us something about Neptune and Aries. It tells us that Neptune and Aries dissolves old structures and forces the birth of something new. Italy had been had just been this idea rather than a reality, a dream of national unity, but not something tangible. But Neptune and Aries demands action. The dream had to be made real, even if it required war. And so what does that mean for us now? It means that we could see new nations form, old alliances dissolve. I'm thinking of the US and Canada right now. The US and literally anyone right now. It's such a mess. Even political borders shifting. There might be separatist movements gaining traction, just as there were in the 1860s. Nations that have struggled for independence might finally start to take some action, expect territorial disputes, the redrawing of borders, right? All of these very interesting things. Just overall, this intensification of nationalist sentiment, that's all going to get inflamed and expanded as well once Jupiter enters Cancer this year, because Cancer is the home and nationality. Man, we are really in for a treat, and not a sweet one. Anyway, Aries is conquest. It's me first. It wants what it wants and it wants it now. Neptune is ideologies, it's belief systems, it's collective consciousness. So when you put those two together, ideologies become weapons. We will see a rise in people who are willing to fight, literally and metaphorically, for their beliefs. So as I've been saying, the last time that Neptune was in Aries, the United States was literally at war with itself, right? The Civil War wasn't just a military conflict, it was an ideological war over the meaning of freedom. It was a time when people were willing to die for their beliefs, to fight to the bitter end for what they saw as justice. So now as Neptune re-enters Aries, we're on the brink of another ideological war. But this time the battlefield won't be just physical. It could be physical for sure, but it will also 100% be cultural, digital, and psychological. The fight won't just be over land, it will be over truth itself. Expect to see radical individualism, which means more people rejecting institutions and government and choosing self-sufficiency, embracing DIY rebellion, which I'll talk more about later. Expect leaders who present themselves as warriors, expect politicians and influencers who frame themselves as fighters and survivors and risk takers. Expect a rise in lone wolf activism. Aries is the lone wolf, which means less reliance on collective movements, more one-person revolutions. Neptune in Aries isn't about diplomacy, it's about conviction. And that means we're entering a time where negotiation and peace, if I'm putting it bluntly, which I always do because I have Mars in my first house, takes a back seat to action, for better or worse. And there are two people I want to talk about in relation to all of this, two people who I think I already mentioned in relation to this transit in my last video, and the two people who you see on this thumbnail. The first is Luigi Mangione, because his story is a story that already feels like a prophecy to this transit. In December of 2024, Luigi Mangione became pretty much a household name. I think everyone knows him, but not for reasons that anyone expected. He was arrested and put on trial for allegedly murdering the United Health CEO, Brian Thompson. Some called it a violent, inexcusable act of rage. Other people saw it as the desperate retaliation of a man crushed by an unjust system. But regardless of where you stand, one thing is pretty clear to me. Mangione is no longer just a man, he's a symbol. And that is the Neptune and Aries effect in real time. Neptune distorts reality, Aries demands action, and so together they create a world where acts of violence take on a mythical meaning. It's no longer just about the crime or the person, it's about the narrative that gets built around them. Neptune makes people larger than life, turning them into gods and icons and heroes and warriors and saviors and villains, depending on who's telling the story. This was a perfect example to me of how Neptune and Aries blurs the line between heroism and extremism. Some people see Mangione as a criminal, as a murderer who let anger consume him, but other people see him as a symptom of a broken world, a vigilante who struck back against corporate greed, right, against a system that exploits the vulnerable. And that right there is the key theme of Neptune and Aries, the rise of lone warriors, solo warriors, who, whether justified or not, will be framed as defenders of justice. And I promise you, this is just the beginning. Everyone engage with this video so that when these things do happen, people can reference what I'm saying right now. I'm a prophet. And over the next 14 years, we will see more figures like Mangione, people who take extreme action, people whose stories become national or global flashpoint, whose names turn into battle cries for different ideological factions. And as this Neptune and Aries era unfolds, the question that we'll have to ask ourselves is this, like, are these figures heroes or are they warnings? If you want a fictional prophecy for Neptune and Aries, look no further than the fucking Hunger Games. It's literally the Hunger Games. If I had to give you any reference at all for Neptune and Aries, it would unfortunately be the Hunger Games, because Katniss Everdeen is the perfect embodiment of this energy. From the very beginning, Katniss never wanted to be a hero. She never wanted to start a revolution. Her only goal was to survive and to keep her loved ones safe. But that's the thing about Neptune and Aries. It doesn't ask for permission. It drags people into battle, whether they like it or not. It doesn't really care about intentions. It just creates warriors out of necessity. So Katniss is a perfect example of how Neptune and Aries works because she embodies its core three themes. Number one is martyrdom as a necessity, right? Katniss never seeks power, but she's forced into it. The system demands a sacrifice and she is unwillingly chosen. Granted, she did volunteer.
I volunteer as tribute!
But in the real world, we will see figures who don't start out as activists or warriors or revolutionaries, but are forced into those roles by circumstance. Someone who I'm thinking about right now as I say this is Bisan, the Palestinian journalist turned activist who has been documenting the Israeli invasion and genocide of Gaza. If you don't know who that is, loves, you should. Number two is symbolism over substance. The rebels don't just need a fighter in the Hunger Games, right? They need a myth, a mockingjay. Neptune and Aries is about turning people into icons that rally movements, sometimes at the expense of their personal well-being. And number three is war as a spiritual journey, because Aries rules combat, but then Neptune spiritualizes it. And to me, that means that in the coming years, conflict won't just be about survival or politics. It will be framed as a battle for meaning, for belief, and for the soul of society itself. We've already seen real life Katniss figures emerge, people who have become the face of resistance, whether they wanted it to be that way or not. Figures like Greta, who started as a solo climate activist and became a symbol for an entire generation. Figures like Bisan, people like Edward Snowden, who went from being a NSA employee to a global fugitive and whistleblower. These are the type of figures who will dominate the Neptune and Aries era, people who step into battle willingly or not and really just become myths and legends in the process. But the thing about Neptune and Aries is this danger. Just like Katniss was manipulated by both the Capitol and the rebels, real world revolutionaries will have to navigate who is really pulling the strings. Some people will be true warriors for justice. Other people will be manufactured myths, people who are carefully curated to serve hidden agendas. And in the Neptune Aries era, the biggest challenge will truly be telling the difference. This is probably one of the most dreary, low vibrational videos I'll make this year, and I'm so sorry for that, but I'm just not going to sugarcoat or lie to you guys about things. This is not the best transit. Or let me rephrase, this is the kind of transit where it has to get a lot worse before it gets better, Like by the end of the transit all the way in 2039, so much stuff will have been exposed and gutted out for the better, but it's going to be ugly. And I think that What brings me a bit of peace is that when I think of all the terrible things that have happened in our history, none of them were, I believe, were solved with a peaceful protest. Like resistance was a necessity. And don't hate me, but I think more people now, given the state of our world, are realizing something I've known to be true, which is that peaceful protests are not working, at least in the way we think they are. And that collective action only works if it lasts for months on end. And that pretty much never happens because the majority of people are just not consistent with it. So with that being said, I want to end the video with some predictions of mine for the next 14 years, specifically revolving around Neptune in Aries. The first is that we'll see a new level of self-mythologizing. Influencers, celebrities, entrepreneurs will create this larger than life personalities presenting themselves as modern day heroes or warriors, lone pioneers, radical individualists. Their internet personalities will become even more detached from reality. And they're going to create these really elaborate origin stories about their struggles and their victories and their personal battles. Number two, the leaders who rise to power during this time will not be peacemakers. They will be fighters, they will be revolutionaries, strong men. Expect politicians and CEOs and public figures to use warrior rhetoric, presenting themselves as risk takers and just people who get things done with force. Example, a certain US president in the 2020s will deepen their image by painting themselves as the only person tough enough to handle these global issues that we're facing. Number three, Aries does not negotiate, it acts. So during this time, expect a lot less diplomacy and just a lot more aggressive decisions from world leaders and corporations. Coalitions will weaken, alliances will fracture, and people will take action without waiting for approval. Example, a country might pull out of a global agreement, so like climate, trade, military, without attempting to renegotiate, framing it as an act of strength and sovereignty. Isn't it scary how these things are literally already happening? Oh my god, I'm gonna lose my mind. Let's move on. And in terms of pop culture, we're definitely going to see the rise of combat entertainment. So this means a boom in brutal survivalist warrior based media, everything from post apocalyptic films to like gladiator, like reality TV shows. I can definitely see that being a thing that happens. So like remakes and new franchises of Gladiator, Mad Max, The Hunger Games, John Wick style action films, those will all really dominate and just be really popular. Combat sports will rise in popularity, so like UFC style fights, extreme survival competitions, and just like grittier, more violent sports are gonna go mainstream, which is so fun. Oh my god, I can't wait for that. Number two, DIY rebellion, which just means that instead of massive collective movements, we'll see the rise of lone figures of resistance, which I mentioned earlier. So whistleblowers, rogue journalists, anti-heroes who expose corporation on their own, things like that, like a lot of hackers. I think anonymous hacking collectives will be really important too because they'll give way to individual digital vigilantes who will just becoming heroes for like leaking government or corporate secrets. So like a young hacker might release explosive government secrets, not under a collective identity like WikiLeaks or something, or just underneath like a personal brand, like kind of like a Robin Hood figure, like something of the sort. Number three, and this is the last one, music will change. Themes of war, personal battle, and resilience will dominate mainstream music. Like punk will come back, hardcore rap, heavy rock. Yeah, I would really expect a new wave of artists branding themselves as like outlaws and exiles and rebels and stuff, and just rejecting mainstream labels in favor of extreme independence. So hopefully that means a rock album from Beyonce for Act 3. Anyway, over the next 14 years, we'll see a world where the warrior archetype dominates, where diplomacy takes a backseat to bold action, and where self styled heroes and vigilantes reshape society, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But Neptune in Aries is a sneaky little babe, and the line between freedom fighter and extremist, or like hero and villain, truth and propaganda, will just really become dangerously thin. So we need to stay grounded in critical thinking. Just because someone claims to be a warrior for justice doesn't mean that they are. I think this transit will really challenge us to redefine what it means to be a warrior in the modern world. Will we use this energy to build something powerful, or will we let it consume us in endless battles with each other. What do you guys think? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you like this video, which I hope you did, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to know more about how this energy will affect you personally, you can always book a reading with me. My links are in the description below.